Hello everyone and welcome to the first Terraria video. Now, as this is our first one, we are going to do our strengths and talk about logic, and maybe later on we'll get another little video on some tips and tricks that I might have wanted to know before I started working on the risk computer that I'm doing currently on stream. But yeah, regardless, we're just going to talk about logic very briefly. Now you might be thinking, why is there a point of talking about logic? We have AND and OR gates already. We don't need to make them ourselves. We also have some other more complex gates, but I don't really use them too much. I primarily just use the AND and ORs. Although I definitely could simplify it with the Morgans and stuff like that if I really wanted to. But these gates that we have are a little bit tricky, a little bit complex, so I figured I might as well just give a little bit of an overview because you need the logic lamps in order to make the gates operate. Now this was a little bit tricky for me to start. I didn't quite understand it, so I definitely had to do a little bit of internet diving, so hopefully this provides a pretty decent explanation for anybody who's interested in how it works. Now you have 4 different colored wrenches, so you can place 4 different colored wires. You have red wires, green wires, blue wires, and yellow wires. Now these wires, if they cross, do not actually trigger each other. They stay separate. So this yellow going across would stay separate from the blue, from the green, from the red. And that's very, very important to know because there are many instances where I need to cross wires and bring them all together and whatnot during the risk computer. And frankly, knowing this utility and knowing how this interacts and whatnot is extremely beneficial. So with these gates though, these gates, the output comes from the center and you can pass the wire to basically anything that you want to trigger. What I have right here are just some gem spark blocks. The one on the right is on, the one on the left is off, and I'm just going to pass it to the one on the left so you can kind of see what happens when you toggle it, and I'll just do the same for this one. Now, we have our gate hooked up, but we don't have our input set. And I gotta say, one of the cool things that I really like about Terraria is that these logic lamps, you can make as many of them as you wish. So this is an AND gate right here. I can just stack as many of these lamps as I want. And that will be, all of these need to be on because it's an AND gate, so AND every single one of these in order to trigger the gate. This one, on the other hand, I can pass, a random option. This is an OR gate. So, this is on at the moment, and as I said, you can see that the gem spark block is on because we have 2 pieces that are on. So that's great, that's awesome. And again, it's really nice to be able to stack as many inputs because it very heftily simplifies just having an 8 input AND gate or having like a 4 input AND gate or something like that. So I'm just going to clear these guys off real fast. And let's just show a quick little circuit of how this might work. Here we have 2 gates right here, and I'm going to place down 2 switches that can trigger each of them. And feeding in wires. Now, because of the color difference, I'm going to make sure I use different colored wires, just preliminarily for the sake of making sure that it works completely functionally and everything like that. I've connected my wires to my switches. And I'm just going to make the wires disappear by going to something non-circuitry related. And as I flip a switch, you can see that the gate turns on. So that little gate is toggling back and forth between off and on, off and on. And as it's an AND gate, when they're both on, it triggers and goes through. Very, very simple, not that complex whatsoever. Now, if I were to add one of these gates here, these gates effectively act as NOT gates. And I'm going to cross just so I can show you a demonstration of what exactly happens there. These effectively act as NOT inputs. So when I toggle this one, it goes off, but this is in its default state is on. So, if we trigger both of those, the gate turns on, but if we trigger this one, because this is knotted, it turns off and whatnot. So Terraria actually has a pretty robust system of logic already built in. And I know this was a very, very instrumental, brief overview of roughly how this all works. But hopefully in the days to come, I'll have a more complex video out on some of the tips and tricks. And very soon, this risk computer will be done and it will be explained and everything will hopefully make sense. I know it's very complicated and whatnot, but this is where our end goal is hopefully going to be. And for now, this is where our starting position has been. Now, there is one other subject that I do want to touch upon, and that is the logic lamp, but faulty. Now, as I mentioned, we do have the ons, we do have the offs, and I did display those with this being kind of like an inverting input, but the faulty logic lamp is used for random number generation. Now, random number generation is pretty difficult to achieve normally. However, this provides a very, very concise and easy method to get random numbers. Now, the way that this works is it overrides the function of the gate. So the gate with a faulty logic lamp on top is no longer an and, an or, an XOR, anything like that. It is purely just an output. And what the faulty logic lamp does is this wire is, again, triggering the faulty logic lamp. When this triggers, it will pick one of the gates below the faulty logic lamp. In this case, it is 3. And if that lamp is on, it will send a pulse. If that lamp is off, it will not send a pulse. So when I toggle this switch, nothing happens. And you might think it's broken, but that's because it has a 1 in 3 chance of actually triggering. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5. We're getting really unlucky. And there we go. We triggered it because we finally landed on one of the ones that actually has the pulse triggered. So if we were to manipulate this and send all of them on, every single time we toggle this, we're going to guaranteed to be getting a 1 because 3 out of 3 is 100%. So every single time we're going to receive an input. If we turn all of these off, then this is never going to change because 0 out of 3 is 0%. So there's no probability that we can actually trigger anything. And, you know, of course, you can make this any fraction. You can base this on inputs. So the more inputs you have turned on, the more likely you are to trigger something. Again, this is a 2/3 chance. So, you know, every so often it's going to flip and every so often it's not going to, based on a 2/3 probability. So this is a very, very strong and unique tool to use because it's going to provide a whole bunch of far-reaching applications. And once again, we're not going to actually use this in the RISC computer, which will be coming out once again very soon. But it is very, very cool to talk about. So that is all that I have for the introduction to logic, and I will be talking about some very useful tips and tricks hopefully in the next video. But until then, take it easy, have a good rest of your day, evening, and or night, and thank you all for watching.